I said no, Alex. I won't fund your $800,000 app idea. He didn't argue. He just smiled, slow, cold, and later that night he brushed past the display table at my engagement party. One elbow twitch, one sharp crack, and our $4,000 heirloom necklace, custom designed to honor our late grandfather, shattered across the floor. Gasps. Silence. And then, that smirk. "Oops," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. But the part that truly broke me was my mother's voice, soft and infuriating. "You know he's sensitive, Emily. Don't overreact." Sensitive? That's what they called it? Not sabotage, not jealousy, just sensitivity. And while I stood there, knees trembling, pulse thudding in my ears, trying to hold together the one night I'd worked my entire life to earn, he leaned back and watched it unravel, piece by piece. He wasn't just my brother, he was the golden child, and I was the scapegoat he'd built his entire identity around. But here's the thing about golden children, they shine, until the truth hits the light. Funny how one smirk can snap more than a necklace. 3 weeks earlier. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 now, a marketing executive in Seattle. But if you really want to understand why my story spirals the way it does, we have to start in the place where it all began. Our quiet suburban neighborhood tucked into the Pacific Northwest. I can still see it. Evergreen trees lining the cul-de-sacs, the sharp smell of pine mixed with the faint tang of rain-soaked asphalt. Kids rode their bikes up and down the streets, laughter echoing, the sun cutting through gray clouds in weak, stubborn streaks. That street was my childhood stage, and on that stage, 2 very different stories played out, mine and my younger brother Alex's. I was 7 years older than him. When he was born, I was already old enough to sense the way the air shifted in our house. I had been the only child for a while, so I knew what it felt like to be the center of attention, and then suddenly, not. But it wasn't just the normal new baby glow. Alex was different in their eyes. To Mom and Dad, he was fragile, sensitive, special. That's how they always put it. And maybe that sounds sweet. Maybe you think that's what parents should say. But when you're the older sibling working for every scrap of recognition, hearing those words feels like a knife that dulls you down a little more each year. Take something as simple as a bike. I worked after school at a local coffee shop. Not legally, of course, I was too young, but the owner let me sweep the floors and wash dishes for a few crumpled bills. I saved every dollar, every coin. The night I finally wheeled home my second-hand bike from a garage sale, the chain rusty, the paint scratched, my heart swelled with pride. It was mine. I had earned it. I still remember the greasy feel of the handlebars under my fingers, the squeak of the pedals as I tested it out, wobbling down the street while the air smelled like wet earth. That sound, that squeak, was the sound of my independence. 2 weeks later, Alex, barely 8 years old, rolled out with a brand new skateboard. Shiny, bright, the wheels clicking smooth and effortless against the sidewalk. He hadn't lifted a finger for it. Dad just came home one evening and said, "Alex wanted this." And there it was. My squeaky bike suddenly felt like a joke next to his gleaming board. I pedaled harder, faster, trying to prove to myself that mine was better because I earned it. But the image of him coasting, hair flipping back, face lit up by pure satisfaction, it gnawed at me. I was proud of myself, but I couldn't ignore the sting. It didn't stop with the skateboard. Alex would ask for toys, expensive action figures, the newest video game, and somehow, magically, they'd appear in his room by the weekend. I'd ask for something modest, and Mom would sigh, tell me we had to watch expenses, remind me that I was old enough to understand. That phrase, old enough to understand, still makes me grit my teeth. Because what it really meant was, you're old enough to go without. I can still hear the conversations. Mom, her nurse's uniform still wrinkled from her shift, telling me softly, "Alex just needs a little extra love, Emily." I'd bite back my reply, the words sticking in my throat. Extra love. As if love was a finite resource, measured out, and I was supposed to understand why my portion kept shrinking. Sometimes I'd try to point it out. "Why does he get everything so easy?" I'd ask, my voice trembling between accusation and exhaustion. Dad would look up from his laptop, glasses sliding down his nose, and mutter something about how Alex was still finding his place. I was finding my place too, but apparently no one noticed. What hurt most wasn't even the toys, the bike, the skateboard, it was the pattern. Alex would demand something, sometimes with that whining edge in his voice, sometimes stomping his feet, and they would bend to it, every single time. It didn't matter if it was candy at the grocery store or money for a school trip. They'd glance at each other, then sigh, then give in. And every time they did, something inside me tightened. I kept wondering, why do I have to scrape and save while he just points and receives? What did that teach him? What did it teach me? Looking back, I can see the seeds planted right there in those small moments. The smell of hot chocolate steaming in my hands as I watched him unwrap another gift. The metallic rattle of my bike chain as I pushed harder, trying to prove that effort meant something. The sound of his skateboard wheels gliding smooth while I pedaled, breathless, legs burning. Those sensory snapshots never left me, because they weren't just about childhood play. They were lessons, silent ones, shaping who we'd both become. At the time, though, I just felt the unfairness like a dull ache. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself that one day it would even out, that someday someone would notice how hard I worked. But in the quiet of my room, lying under a quilt Mom had stitched years earlier, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder, how many times do you have to be overlooked before you stop expecting to be seen? How many times does favoritism chip away at you before resentment becomes part of your blood? The truth is, I wanted to believe my effort mattered. That's why I clung so fiercely to that old bike, even when its chain rusted further, even when the paint flaked off and the brakes squealed embarrassingly loud. It was my reminder that I could create something for myself, even if no one applauded. But deep down, the resentment simmered. Every time Alex got what he wanted with a snap of his fingers, it boiled a little hotter. And maybe you think I'm exaggerating. After all, plenty of siblings deal with some level of favoritism. But in our house, it wasn't just favoritism. It was an imbalance so stark it felt like two separate worlds coexisting under one roof. My world was responsibility, scrimping, proving myself. His was entitlement, indulgence, and constant reinforcement that his whims mattered most. And even though I was young, I knew that couldn't end well. I always wondered why I had to scrape by while Alex got everything handed to him. That question followed me, haunted me, shaped me. Because favoritism doesn't just stop in childhood. It grows roots. And when roots run deep, they twist into places you never expect. So here's the question I ask myself, and maybe you'll ask it too. How did all that favoritism shape us? What did it turn me into? And what did it turn Alex into? High school was supposed to be the time when I figured out who I was, when I dreamed about the future and maybe even enjoyed a little freedom. Instead, it felt like a constant grind. My weekends weren't filled with parties or mall trips like other kids. I spent them behind the counter at a busy Seattle coffee shop, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and burnt caramel. The hum of the grinder became the background music of my teenage years, the hiss of steaming milk almost like a second language. My hands were always warm from holding paper cups, my clothes forever carrying that faint bittersweet aroma of espresso. I told myself it was worth it. Every hour, every aching shift after late-night homework was another step toward buying what I needed most, a laptop. Not a sleek, flashy model, just something functional, something mine. I counted each paycheck like it was a badge of honor, proof that I could take care of myself. When I finally had enough, I went to a secondhand store and picked out a beat-up laptop, the kind with sticky keys and a trackpad that worked only if you pressed it just right. But when I carried it home, the weight of it in my backpack felt like treasure. That machine wasn't perfect, but it was earned. Meanwhile, Alex was 14, and his world looked nothing like mine. I'll never forget the day Dad wheeled in a brand new gaming PC, sleek and glowing, cable still wrapped, fans whispering like a promise of endless escape. Alex grinned like Christmas had come early. He hadn't saved a penny, hadn't worked a shift, hadn't even asked politely. He just hinted, dropped a few casual what-if comments about how much better his games would look, and there it was, a top-of-the-line setup waiting for him. The neon lights of the tower bathed his room in a soft glow, like his own private universe. I stood in the doorway, holding my own heavy backpack, still smelling faintly of coffee grounds. He caught my look and shrugged, sliding into his chair. "Don't be jealous," he muttered, his eyes already glued to the screen. Jealous? That word stabbed deeper than he realized. It wasn't jealousy. It was exhaustion, frustration, that constant burn of knowing effort didn't matter when it came to him. Later that night, when I brought it up to Dad, hoping for just a sliver of acknowledgement, he barely looked away from his computer. "He's got a creative spark, Em," he said. "He needs tools to shine." I stared at him, speechless. Tools to shine? And what about me? What about the sticky laptop I bought with blisters on my hands and dark circles under my eyes? Did I not need tools to shine? It was always the same justification. Alex was different. He was special. He just needed inspiration. Meanwhile, I was the one who had to be practical, responsible, the one who would figure it out on her own. And maybe I did figure it out, but the cost was heavy. Nights spent hunched over textbooks, laptop fans wheezing as I typed essays, while the house echoed with the clicking of Alex's keyboard and his bursts of laughter when he won another game. My lamp flickered with that tired yellow light, and down the hall, his room glowed like an arcade. The imbalance didn't just sting, it warped the way I saw myself. Every paycheck, every essay, every shift was supposed to feel like progress, but instead, each one just reminded me that no matter how hard I worked, he'd always have the upper hand. He didn't have to prove himself because they never asked him to. Sometimes I'd walk past his door and hear him yelling into his headset, completely absorbed in another match. "You'll never get it, Em," he told me once when I teased him about spending hours online. "Gaming's the future. You're stuck in the past." He said it with that smug half smile, not realizing, or maybe not caring, how dismissive it sounded. And maybe he believed it. Maybe he really thought his creative spark made him destined for something bigger. But what I saw was someone shielded from responsibility, someone who believed the world would always bend in his favor, because at home, it always did. I used to lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of his PC fans through the wall. That sound drove me crazy. It wasn't just technology, it was proof. Proof that his comfort came without effort, while mine came only through struggle. And the worst part? Mom and Dad looked at him like he was some kind of prodigy, while I was just steady, reliable, the one who didn't need attention. Every time I zipped up my apron at the coffee shop, I told myself I was building something real. Every dollar I folded into my pocket was proof I could stand on my own. But every time I saw Alex's glowing screen, that proof cracked a little. How long could I keep convincing myself that hard work was enough when the people closest to me seemed blind to it? The frustration built slowly, like steam under a lid, until I felt like I might burst. I wanted to scream at them, to ask, "Why do you let him coast? Why do you reward him for nothing while I break myself trying?" But instead, I kept working, kept saving, kept biting my tongue. Because if they weren't listening then, would they ever? And that's the thing about double standards. They don't just frustrate you in the moment. They plant doubt that follows you everywhere. Every paycheck was supposed to be a badge of pride, but standing next to his glowing screen, it just felt like a reminder that I was fighting a battle no one else even acknowledged. Most nights blurred together. The soft hum of my laptop fan struggling under the weight of endless research papers, the faint laughter of students drifting from the hall, the scratch of my pen filling margin after margin with reminders. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, bouncing from tutoring shifts to late-night copywriting gigs just to keep myself afloat. My hands were always dry from cheap cafeteria soap, my eyes red from screen glow, but I told myself every dollar I scraped together was a badge of honor. Pride, that was my fuel. And then there was Alex, my younger brother, my so-called opposite. While I hustled and clawed for stability, Alex drifted through his late teens like a feather on the breeze. He flunked out of one community college, tried another, and flunked again. Each time, Mom and Dad stepped in, no hesitation. Tuition, paid, supplies, covered. His excuses were almost comical. Classes were boring, professors were unfair. He just wasn't inspired. I tried to push it out of my head, but at every family call, every holiday visit, it came back. One Thanksgiving, I remember Mom stirring gravy while I sat at the counter, exhaustion etched into my face after pulling double shifts the week before. I mentioned how hard it was balancing everything, how I barely had time to eat between classes and work. She gave me that familiar patient smile and said, "Alex is still figuring it out, unlike you, Em. Unlike me." Her words froze me in place. My fork hovered over the plate, my mouth dry. What did that even mean? That my grinding, my exhaustion, my constant push forward wasn't figuring it out? But his failure after failure somehow was? That sentence lodged in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. I went back to school after the break with a storm inside me, and that's when the real crack appeared. One late night in my dorm, the rain tapping against the window in that steady Seattle rhythm, I was scrolling through emails on my laptop. My inbox was cluttered. Professors' reminders, internship leads, scholarship notifications. In my rush, I clicked the wrong thread. My eyes landed on words that didn't belong to me. It was from Mom, addressed to Alex. "We'll cover your extras, Alex, don't worry." I froze, my breath caught, and for a second, all I could hear was the buzz of the old lamp above me. Extras. That word looped in my mind like a curse. What extras? Rent? Credit card bills? Allowances? Things I had never once been offered? My hands shook over the keyboard, the glow of the screen burning into my eyes. I had fought tooth and nail for scholarships, taken out loans, skipped meals, and here he was, cushioned with invisible nets I hadn't even known existed. I closed the email, but the words stayed imprinted in my mind. I thought about calling her right then, demanding an explanation, but what would she say? That Alex just needed more? That I didn't? So I sat there instead, surrounded by the smell of stale coffee from the mug on my desk, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter from the dorm hallway, and wondered if everything I believed about my family was just an illusion. A week later, the suspicion deepened. I was in the library this time, sitting at a long wooden table polished smooth from decades of elbows and notebooks. The space was hushed, filled only with the shuffle of pages and the faint squeak of chairs. I was switching between tabs when it happened again. A glimpse, just a fraction of a second, of another email not meant for me. Alex's name, numbers beside it, phrasing that carried a weight of money. I didn't catch the full content, but the tone was enough. Secretive, financial, hidden. My stomach dropped. My pulse thudded in my ears. Were they funneling money to him the whole time? Were they covering debts, padding his life while letting me struggle? I snapped my laptop shut, the clap echoing too loudly in the quiet library. Heads turned, eyes narrowing in irritation, but I didn't care. My thoughts screamed louder than any sound. Walking back to my dorm that night, the Seattle drizzle soaked into my coat, the cold biting through the thin fabric. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement, each step echoing with the same question. What else were they hiding? It was no longer about the laptop I worked for, or the side hustles, or the double shifts. It was about the truth, about realizing that the story I thought I was living, that effort mattered, that fairness existed, might have been a lie all along. I tried to tell myself I could handle resentment. I'd carried it since childhood. But this wasn't just resentment anymore. This was doubt, the kind that spreads like cracks in glass. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. And with every step I took that night, the question pounded harder in my chest. If they could hide this, if they could choose to cushion him while letting me scrape by, then what else had they been keeping from me all these years? My hustle had always been my pride, the thing that kept me sane. But after those emails, that pride twisted into something darker. Was I working this hard because I was strong, or because they had already decided I wasn't worth supporting? I smiled through phone calls after that, nodded when Dad said Alex was just finding his way. But behind every nod, every polite laugh, one thought pulsed like a warning. My family's truth was not what it seemed. So I kept grinding. I kept hustling. But inside, suspicion gnawed at me like a secret I couldn't shake. And the question haunted me in every quiet moment. What else were they hiding? By the time I turned 25, I had built myself into someone I barely recognized compared to the girl pedaling that rusty bike. The grind of scholarships, side hustles, and endless nights had finally paid off. I landed a senior role at a fast-growing tech marketing firm in Seattle. The office itself felt like a different planet from where I'd started. Glass walls that gleamed in the afternoon sun, polished concrete floors echoing with the click of heels and hurried conversations, screens flickering with campaign pitches. My voice carried across conference rooms now, not as the ignored older sibling, but as the strategist people turned to for solutions. I remember one pitch in particular, The lights dimmed, the projector whirring, my slides glowing against the wall. My hands didn't shake anymore. They commanded the room. The scent of espresso lingered from the break station, but this time it wasn't tied to exhaustion. It was fuel for ambition. When the client nodded, impressed, and my boss clapped me on the shoulder afterward, I felt a surge of pride. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. That's when I decided I deserved more than just work. I rented a sleek downtown apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline. At night, the city glowed through floor-to-ceiling windows, the Space Needle piercing the sky like a reminder that I had risen above the shadows of my past. I'd stand there sometimes with a glass of wine, the hum of traffic below, the neon of Pike Place Market in the distance, and think, I built this. No one handed it to me. And then came Ryan. He wasn't just someone I met, he was someone who seemed to steady the ground beneath me. A graphic designer with a laugh that made tension slip away, he came from a family that didn't play games with favoritism. His parents were the kind that shared chores, celebrated each child equally, and it showed in him. He listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't realized I craved. Where I was sharp edges from years of hustling, he was calm, rounded corners that softened the jagged parts of me. The first time I brought him to a family gathering, I braced myself. It was a summer barbecue in our parents' backyard, string lights draped from the porch, the smell of grilled corn and burgers thick in the warm air. Kids darted between lawn chairs, cicadas hummed in the trees, and for a moment, I almost allowed myself to pretend this was a normal family evening. But Alex never let things stay normal. He was lounging in a chair, scrolling on his phone, when suddenly he announced, "I need $500. Just like that. No lead-in, no explanation, just demand. He barely looked up as he added, "For a VR headset. I've been waiting for it to drop." Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom fussed with the potato salad, and I felt that familiar pressure in my chest. Ryan raised an eyebrow, watching. When Dad hesitated, Alex's face turned red. He slammed his hand on the armrest. "Why is this such a big deal? You've paid for bigger things. Just give it to me." Guests turned their heads. The easy laughter of a moment before faltered. Alex's voice cracked with anger, his cheeks blotchy, his eyes wild. He looked less like a 20-something man and more like a child denied candy at the checkout aisle. I clenched my fists under the table, heat rising in my own face. I wanted to scream at him, to call out how ridiculous this had become. But before I could, Ryan leaned close to me, his voice calm, low enough for only me to hear. "Your brother's gonna crash hard if they keep bailing him out." The words sliced through me, not with cruelty, but with clarity. I looked at Ryan, at his steady expression, and realized he saw what I had tried for years to minimize. Alex wasn't just spoiled. He wasn't just indulged. He was spiraling into something worse, someone who believed the world owed him everything. Mom, trying to smooth things over, whispered, "Alex just gets passionate." Dad sighed, muttered something about how maybe they could figure it out later. The air was heavy, the smell of charred burgers now tinged with tension. Guests avoided eye contact, pretending to focus on their plates. Ryan didn't push. He didn't make a scene. But as Alex sulked, muttering curses under his breath, I caught Ryan's glance again. In his eyes, I saw something I'd ignored in my own reflection for years. Alex wasn't harmless. He was trouble. Driving back to the apartment that night, the hum of the city filling the silence between us, Ryan finally spoke. "I've never seen a family dynamic like that," he said softly. "It's like they're afraid of him." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching the blur of headlights in the rearview mirror. "They call it sensitivity," I muttered, almost ashamed. Ryan shook his head. "Sensitivity is one thing. This is enabling." His words hung in the air long after we pulled into the garage. I carried them upstairs, into the apartment where the skyline glittered, into my thoughts as I brushed my teeth, into the quiet when I lay in bed beside him. For years I had told myself Alex's tantrums were just quirks, his demands just phases, his entitlement just immaturity. But Ryan saw it for what it was, and once I heard it spoken aloud, I couldn't unhear it. And yet even with that clarity, part of me still hoped that maybe Alex would grow out of it, hoped that maybe I could keep the peace. But in the back of my mind, one question whispered louder and louder. How long could I balance success, love, and family chaos before it all came crashing together? Ryan had given me strength I didn't know I needed. But Alex had just shown me that his demands weren't fading, they were growing. The night Ryan and I shared our engagement with my family was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. After years of clawing my way through school, hustling to build a career, and carrying the weight of being the reliable one, I finally had something worth celebrating. Something that wasn't about my responsibility or resilience, just joy. At my parents' dining table, the warm glow from the chandelier cast a soft amber light across the china and glasses. Mom had pulled out her best set, the one she only used for holidays. The table smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, and laughter bounced lightly between the walls. Ryan sat beside me, his hand resting gently over mine, telling the story of how he proposed. My dad leaned forward, eyes bright, nodding at the details, while Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Lisa, my best friend since high school, was there too. She slid her hand under the table and gave mine a firm squeeze. "You deserve this," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. For once it felt like the spotlight had shifted toward me. For once my story was worth celebrating. But at the far end of the table, Alex sulked. He stabbed at his food without really eating, his fork clinking sharply against the plate with every movement. He avoided eye contact, staring at the wine glass in front of him as though it had wronged him personally. Every time someone asked about venues or dates, he let out a long, exaggerated sigh or shifted noisily in his seat. It was as if he wanted the joy in the room to feel incomplete. I tried to push past it. I told myself I wasn't going to let his moodiness steal this from me. But even as I laughed at my dad's jokes and shared glances with Ryan, I could feel Alex's resentment pressing down like a weight, reminding me that nothing in this family ever came without a shadow. Later that night, after dessert, I pulled him aside in the kitchen. "I want you to be a groomsman," I told him. I didn't say it because I wanted him there, not really, but because I could already see the storm building. I thought if I threw him a role, it might calm the waters. His smirk told me he knew exactly what I was doing. "Sure," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "I'll think about it." Of course, he said yes in the end, not because he cared about being part of my day, but because it gave him another foothold in it. Naming Lisa as my maid of honor was nothing like that. It was the easiest decision I'd made. She had been my anchor through everything, showing up with ice cream after heartbreaks, with champagne after promotions, and with steady encouragement through every storm. She jumped into planning with joy that felt so rare in my life. She was the kind of support I wished my own family had given me. Together, we started planning the engagement party. We toured a rooftop venue downtown, one of those chic Seattle spaces with glass railings and sweeping views of the skyline. The air up there was crisp, carrying hints of salt from the Puget Sound, and the city lights stretched endlessly, pulsing with life. Standing on that terrace, I could already imagine it. The clink of champagne glasses, music spilling into the night, laughter rising over the hum of traffic below. Lisa walked beside me with a folder of swatches and sketches, her energy buzzing with ideas. For a moment, excitement welled in me, the kind that made me forget the heaviness Alex always brought. But of course Alex showed up. He leaned against the railing, arms crossed, staring out at the city like it was his to judge. His tone was sharp, cutting through the evening. "Fairy lights? Really, Em? Kinda overdone." His words dripped with disdain, but it wasn't really about the lights. His eyes, catching the glow of the setting sun, glittered with something colder, resentment. I tried to laugh it off, forcing my voice to stay light. "It's classic," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear even as my chest tightened. Lisa wasn't as diplomatic. She shot him a look, eyebrows raised. "What's wrong with fairy lights? They're timeless." Alex shrugged, muttered, "Trying too hard," and went back to glaring at the skyline. That was Alex lately. Hovering in the corners, poking holes in every joy. He nitpicked the venue, the music, even the idea of personalized menus. His comments were never loud enough to cause a full fight, but they stung all the same, carving little doubts into places I wanted to keep untouched. As Lisa flipped through color palettes and swatches, I watched him out of the corner of my eye. Arms crossed, jaw tight, lips pressed into that familiar sulk. He looked like someone physically pained by the idea of not being the center of attention, and I realized it wasn't just jealousy. It was the kind that festers, the kind that grows dangerous when ignored. I wanted us all to celebrate. I wanted to believe he could swallow his pride and be happy for me. But his glares and his snide remarks cast a shadow over every decision. For every moment Lisa and I laughed over champagne samples, he was there, muttering under his breath, reminding me that my happiness was another reason for his bitterness. The night we finalized the venue after everyone else had left, I stayed behind on the rooftop. The city sparkled beneath me, neon signs flickering, car horns echoing faintly from the streets. The fairy lights we'd tested glowed softly overhead, a warm promise of the celebration to come. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the night air. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. The laughter, the music, Ryan's smile, Lisa's cheers, the clink of glasses as people toasted to our future. It should have filled me with nothing but joy. Instead, Alex's voice echoed in my head. Fairy lights? Really, Em? Kinda overdone. And in that echo I heard the truth. It wasn't just about the lights. It never was. It was about his inability to stand the spotlight shifting away from him. About how every milestone I reached became fuel for his resentment. As the breeze tangled through my hair and the skyline glittered with promise, a question lingered heavy in my chest, one I didn't dare answer yet. How far would Alex go to steal the spotlight? Planning the engagement party should have been one of the most joyful milestones in my life, but the moment Alex inserted himself into the process, everything turned into friction. Ryan and I had been saving for months for one thing we both agreed mattered more than flowers or food or music: a custom heirloom necklace. It wasn't just jewelry. It was meant to honor our late grandfather, the man who had been the quiet center of strength in our family. The design we chose mirrored his old silver chain, with delicate links that symbolized unity and endurance. $4,000. A staggering number, yes, but one we committed to because it represented something lasting, something far beyond the party itself. The jewelry studio itself felt sacred. Glass cases glittered under warm spotlights, each surface polished until it gleamed. The faint scent of varnished wood mixed with the sharper tang of metal polish, and the air carried that hushed reverence places like this always seemed to hold, as though every piece of silver or gold was waiting for a story to belong to. The jeweler slid his sketches across the velvet-lined counter. As I traced the lines with my fingertip, I felt my chest swell with pride. For once, I wasn't just reacting to chaos. I was choosing something meaningful for myself, for Ryan, for our future. And then, Alex ruined it. He slouched in a leather chair, one leg bouncing, eyes narrowed in mock disbelief. 4,000? Seriously, Em? His voice carried through the quiet studio, sharp enough to draw glances from the vendor. For a necklace? That's insane. He let out a laugh that wasn't lighthearted at all, but cutting. You know how many VR headsets you could buy with that. Heat shot to my face. My hand stiffened on the sketch. I could feel the jeweler's professional smile falter at the edges, his eyes flicking uncomfortably between us. Ryan tightened his grip around my hand beneath the counter, steadying me. But Alex wasn't finished. You could take an actual trip somewhere instead of wasting money on a piece of metal, he muttered, his tone laced with scorn. Why do people always think sentiment's worth that much? He chuckled again, louder this time, like he wanted to entertain himself at my expense. Each word landed like a needle, pricking holes into something I wanted to keep whole. The necklace wasn't just silver, it was memory, unity, a symbol of choosing legacy over convenience. But with Alex in the room, everything meaningful felt cheapened. The jeweler cleared his throat, pretending to polish his glasses, but I caught the glance he gave Ryan, as if silently asking if we wanted to continue with the difficult guest looming. I hated that Alex could walk into any room and twist the atmosphere with nothing more than his contempt. While Ryan leaned forward to ask about engraving options, I noticed Alex's phone buzzing on the counter beside him. The glow from the screen caught my eye. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw the faint outline of a photo, blurry but clear enough. Alex, standing in front of a mirror, holding his arm out, flashing a watch. Not just any watch, a luxury brand I recognized instantly, a model worth thousands. My breath caught. A watch? Since when did Alex have the money for that? This was the same brother who had dropped out of 2 community colleges, who had begged our parents for help again and again, who sulked at family dinners over not having enough. And now, suddenly, he had a luxury watch. I tilted my head slightly, trying to confirm, but before I could, Alex snatched the phone off the counter with a speed that was almost too quick, shoving it into his pocket. His lips curled into a smirk that made my stomach tighten. "What's that about?" I asked, my voice steady but my pulse racing. He tilted his head with mock innocence, his eyes glinting. "What, you're snooping now, Em? It's just a watch, but it wasn't." His grin gave him away. It wasn't casual, it wasn't harmless. It was the grin of someone hiding something, of someone daring me to question him further. His body leaned back into the chair, his arms folding across his chest, like he was in control of a game I hadn't agreed to play. I wanted to press, to ask where he got it, how he paid for it, why he thought flashing it around was worth the risk. But the jeweler was still hovering, Ryan was beside me, and I knew that confronting him here would only turn the studio into a war zone, so I bit my tongue. On the outside, I smiled, nodding as Ryan and the jeweler discussed clasp strength and engraving details. On the inside, unease churned. That necklace, our symbol of unity, suddenly felt fragile, its meaning undermined by the ugly questions clawing at me. Was Alex hiding debts, gambling, lying to our parents again, taking more money than they admitted? Or was it worse, something reckless I couldn't even name yet? We walked out into the damp Seattle night, the pavement slick under the glow of the street lamps. The air carried the smell of rain-soaked asphalt, cool against my skin. Ryan tucked the folder of sketches under his arm, his calm presence grounding me as always. Alex trailed behind us, humming tunelessly to himself, like a man who had just played a clever trick no one else understood. At one point, Ryan leaned close and squeezed my shoulder. "Don't let him ruin this for you," he murmured. His voice was steady, reassuring, but even he could see the change in me, the way my shoulders had stiffened, the way my silence stretched too long. I nodded, forcing a smile, but the truth pressed hard against my chest. Alex had already ruined something, not the necklace itself, not our plans, but the peace I wanted to feel about them. That one blurry image of him with that watch had cracked something open, and I couldn't close it again. That photo wasn't a flex. It wasn't a brag. It was a clue, a warning, proof that something in Alex's life was dangerously off. And as we walked under the flickering glow of the street lamps, one question etched itself deeper into me than any engraving ever could. What was Alex hiding with that watch? 3 weeks before the engagement party, Alex cornered me in a Fremont cafe, and in that moment, the air shifted. The cafe itself was alive with its usual rhythm, Edison bulbs glowing amber against exposed brick, the hiss of steaming milk from behind the counter, the sharp tang of roasted beans thick in the air. Every table was crowded, students hunched over laptops, couples sharing pastries, friends laughing over iced lattes. It should have felt warm, even comforting, but with Alex sitting across from me, his body angled forward like a predator closing in, the place suddenly felt too small, too loud, too suffocating. He leaned across the chipped wooden table, elbows digging into the surface, his eyes locking onto mine with that familiar glint, equal parts arrogance and desperation. His voice cut through the buzz of chatter. "You're loaded, Em. Just front the cash for my app. 800,000. That's nothing to you." The words hit me like a slap. My cappuccino froze halfway to my lips. 800,000? My laugh came out brittle, disbelieving, but my heart was already pounding. He didn't blink. "Yeah, I've got this gaming app idea. Genius stuff. It just needs backing. You're in tech, you've got money, connections. Call it an investment gift, from you to me." Gift. He said it like he was asking me to pick up the check at dinner, not nearly $1 million. I studied his face, searching for some sign he was joking. But there was only entitlement, sharpened into something darker. Around us, spoons clattered against mugs, indie guitar strummed from a speaker overhead, baristas called out names, but all of it blurred as his words hung heavy between us. My chest tightened. Alex, I said slowly, setting my cup down to keep my hands from shaking. That's not how this works. I can't just hand you that kind of money. I built everything I have from scratch. Scholarships, loans, side jobs. Nothing was given to me. He cut me off, leaning closer, voice rising enough for heads to turn at nearby tables. Don't act like you can't afford it. You've got the apartment, the senior role, the skyline parties. Meanwhile, I'm stuck because nobody believes in me. This is your chance to fix that. Fix that. As if my success was a mistake that needed correcting. As if I owed him. My throat went dry. His words twisted everything I had worked for into something shameful. Still, I tried to steady myself. I'm not giving you $800,000. What I can do is connect you with people who know the startup world, mentors who can guide you, and I can seed you with $1,500 to get you started. The silence that followed stretched thin, almost unbearable. The hum of the cafe pressed in on me, milk frothing, plates clinking, people murmuring. Alex's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing into slits. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. $1,500? He spat, shoving his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. A few people turned, curious. He didn't care. That's an insult, Em. I asked for real support. I should have known you'd keep everything for yourself. Before I could respond, he snatched his coffee, sloshing it across the table. Drops splattered onto my phone, seeping toward the edge like dark stains. And then he stormed out, leaving behind a trail of whispers and gawking stares. I sat frozen, pulse hammering in my ears, staring at the mess he left behind. My stomach twisted with equal parts anger and disbelief. It was classic Alex, demanding the impossible, lashing out when refused. But something in his eyes before he left unsettled me, a glimmer of calculation behind the fury. I tried to shake it off as I cleaned the table, convincing myself it would blow over. Alex always had tantrums, always exaggerated. This would fade too. But that night, when my phone buzzed and buzzed until it nearly vibrated off the counter, I realized just how wrong I was. The thumbnail stopped me cold. Alex's face lit by his phone camera, his expression perfectly crafted, part wounded, part righteous fury. My thumb hovered over the screen before I tapped. His voice filled the quiet of my apartment, dripping venom with every word. "Emily's always been the selfish golden child," he declared, his eyes burning into the lens. "She hoards her tech money while our family struggles. Guess she never cared about us. She only cares about herself." Each word landed like a blow. I watched, numb, as his rant spiraled on. He framed himself as the underdog, the overlooked brother crushed under the weight of my success. He painted me as the villain, greedy and heartless. The video ended with him shaking his head, sighing like a martyr, as if he carried the burden of my supposed betrayal. Then came the comments. They scrolled endlessly across my screen. Strangers calling me selfish, strangers pitying him, strangers debating my life, my worth, my truth, all based on his lies. Notifications poured in like fireflies gone mad, every buzz another jab to my chest. My body went cold. I sank onto the couch, phone trembling in my hands. His words didn't just sting, they rewrote my entire story. Years of sacrifice, of hustling, of fighting for every inch, erased in seconds and replaced with his version. Emily, the golden child who never cared. I set my phone down, staring at the black screen. My reflection looked back at me, pale and shaken. His voice still echoed in my head, looping, digging deeper. Emily's always been the selfish golden child. In that moment, I realized it wasn't the outrageous demand that gutted me. It was this, the betrayal, the deliberate twisting of my life into a lie for strangers to consume. It wasn't family drama anymore. It was public. It was viral. And the worst part wasn't just the humiliation. It was the certainty that this was only the beginning. As the city lights flickered outside my window and my apartment sat heavy in silence, one thought carved itself into me with brutal clarity. If this was Alex's opening move, what was he planning next? The neon crab outside the Seattle seafood joint flickered in uneven pulses. Red, blue, red again, its light reflecting off the wet pavement where the drizzle hadn't quite dried. Inside, the restaurant was a whirlwind of noise and smells. The sharp tang of lemons squeezed over oysters, the heavy butter of lobster tails steaming on platters, the briny scent of clams and garlic sauce. Glasses clinked and servers wove between tables with trays stacked high, their voices mixing with the chatter of diners. It was the kind of place where people came to celebrate milestones, to laugh loudly, to forget their troubles. But for me, sitting at that round table under the neon glow, there was no comfort. There was only the suffocating weight of what I knew was coming. Alex arrived late, of course. He slid into his chair with an air of practiced ease, offering Mom a kiss on the cheek and shaking Dad's hand like he hadn't detonated my life with his TikTok rant just days before. Ryan sat close beside me, his palm brushing my knee under the table as if reminding me he was there, solid and steady, while I tried to keep my heartbeat from pounding too loud in my ears. The meal started off almost deceptively normal. Wine was poured, crab legs cracked, chatter about the weather and traffic filled the gaps. But Alex couldn't resist. He leaned back in his chair, lifted his glass like he was making a toast, and slipped into his performance voice. The same one he had used countless times. The same one that convinced my parents he was always just a little down on his luck. "I've been working so hard," he said, drawing a dramatic sigh, "and I just need a little help to get this project moving. Nothing major, just modest support." His eyes flicked toward me, daring me to contradict him. Modest help? I couldn't stop the words. My fork froze midair, crab meat slipping back onto my plate. My voice was louder than I expected, sharper, cutting through the buzz of the restaurant. "That's not what you asked for, Alex. You cornered me in a cafe and demanded $800,000. $800,000. The words landed like a thunderclap. Heads turned. Even the server passing by slowed for half a second, eyes darting toward us before hurrying on. Mom blinked, startled, her hand hovering over her wine glass. Dad cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, but Alex leaned forward, eyes wide with mock betrayal. "Wow, Em," he said, his tone dripping with false innocence. "I came to you privately, and now you're blowing this way out of proportion in front of everyone. It wasn't like that." I slammed my napkin down, the sound sharp against the table. "Don't you dare twist this. You called it an investment gift. You made it clear you think I owe you because I worked for what I have." My mom's voice cut in, soft but firm, like she thought reason would smooth this over. "Emily, sweetheart, you're the stable one. Just help your brother out. You know he struggles." Those words, the stable one, rang in my ears, louder than the clattering dishes, louder than the laughter from other tables. Stable meant responsible. Stable meant I was expected to sacrifice again and again because I could take it, because Alex couldn't. My chest burned with it. I leaned forward, my voice trembling but fierce. "I've struggled too, Mom. I skipped meals to pay rent. I worked double shifts just to get through school. I fought for every step I took. Why is his failure always an excuse, but my success always treated like a debt I owe?" Ryan's hand found mine under the table, his grip strong, steadying me. But across from me, Alex only smirked. That smirk, that cold, smug curve of his lips that made my blood boil. He sat back in his chair, swirling his drink lazily, then leaned in just enough for me to catch it, his voice low and venomous. "Careful, Em. Big winds crash hard. Wouldn't want all that hard work of yours to unravel, would we?" The threat was subtle enough that Mom and Dad didn't register it. To them, it probably sounded like a throwaway line, another jab between siblings, but I knew better. His eyes locked on mine, icy and unrelenting, and I saw it, the promise of sabotage, the glee he would take in tearing me down if I didn't bend. The injustice pressed down on me like the weight of the entire restaurant. Around us, glasses clinked and people laughed, oblivious to the storm building at our table. The neon from the bar washed over Alex's face, shifting between red and blue, giving him the look of someone half in shadow, half in flame. My parents sat silent, their loyalty leaning his way, their excuses forming in the quiet between us. Inside, I was screaming. I wanted to shake them, to ask how they couldn't see his manipulation, his lies. But all I could do was grip Ryan's hand tighter and swallow the bitterness clawing its way up my throat. Their excuses for Alex were a slap in the face, proof that my hard work meant nothing in their eyes. Nothing I said could crack the story they had chosen to believe. Alex fragile, me unbreakable, and therefore me responsible. My appetite vanished, the food on my plate cold and untouched. The restaurant, once lively, now felt suffocating. the laughter around me like a cruel soundtrack to the unraveling of my family. And as Alex leaned back, victorious in his quiet way, his smirk seared into my memory. I sat there, heart pounding, breath shallow, one question burning hotter than all the rest. Can I stand firm against them all? The rooftop was everything I had dreamed it would be. Warm string lights draped overhead like stars pulled down from the Seattle sky, swaying in the evening breeze. The skyline stretched out around us, glittering with glass towers and the glowing needle of the Space Needle piercing the night. The smell of catered hors d'oeuvres, truffle fries, seared salmon bites, mingled with the sweet scent of champagne bubbling in tall flutes. Laughter rose and fell like music, the hum of a jazz trio spilling from the speakers. It felt like a moment carved out of time, a celebration where nothing could touch me. Ryan's hand rested gently at my back, grounding me as guests toasted our love, their voices bright with cheer. Lisa squeezed my arm when I grew misty-eyed, whispering, "Look at this, Em. It's your night. Don't forget to breathe it in." For once, I let myself believe her. The weight I'd carried for years, resentment, exhaustion, doubt, lifted just enough for me to feel joy without reservation. But joy doesn't last long when Alex is in the room. From across the terrace, I caught him watching me, half-shadowed under the string lights. His jaw was clenched, his eyes narrowed, and though he forced a polite smile when people looked his way, I knew that expression too well. He wasn't celebrating me. He was plotting. His gaze lingered not on me, but on the small velvet box displayed at the center table. Inside was the heirloom necklace, the piece Ryan and I had worked for months to save for, silver links engraved in memory of my grandfather, meant to symbolize unity and family. It was more than jewelry. It was legacy, pride, something unshakable. At least that's what I believed. After the toasts, as guests shifted toward the dessert table, the air filling with the sweetness of vanilla custards and rich chocolate cakes, Ryan and I posed for photos. The necklace's box sat open on the table beside us, the silver chain catching the glow of the lights, winking like it was alive. That was when Alex moved. He slid past the table, casual at first, greeting a guest with a nod. But then his elbow jerked, his hand slipping, in a way too precise to be clumsy. The velvet box tipped, the necklace spilling across the edge of the table. Before I could move, there was a sickening crack. The chain slammed against the hard surface and snapped, pieces scattering across the concrete like tiny shards of lightning. The music faltered. Gasps erupted, slicing through the hum of chatter. For a heartbeat, it felt as though the entire city had gone silent just to witness this moment. The sound of silver skittering across the floor echoed in my chest. My breath stopped. I stared at the broken necklace glinting under the string lights, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard it hurt. The piece that was supposed to symbolize everything, love, unity, family, lay in fragments at my feet. And then Alex's voice, casual, taunting, broke through the horrified hush. "Oops," he said, his smirk cutting sharp against the night. "Guess I tripped. Sorry, Em." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Flat, deliberate, mocking. Guests began whispering, their voices hushed but not nearly quiet enough. "Did he mean to do that?" one woman near the dessert table asked. Another voice, lower but just as sharp. "That didn't look like an accident." Ryan dropped to his knees instantly, gathering the shards with trembling hands. His jaw was locked tight, his shoulders rigid with fury he didn't release. Lisa touched my arm gently, her eyes flashing with outrage, as if urging me not to let Alex steal the moment. But Alex wasn't hiding it anymore. His smirk widened as he leaned back, arms crossed like a man satisfied with a job done. His eyes locked with mine for a split second, and I saw it. The truth I had always known but dreaded to face. He hadn't tripped. He hadn't slipped. He had struck, calculated and cruel, tearing apart what he couldn't have. That smirk wasn't an accident. It was Alex spitting on my happiness, taking the one night that was supposed to belong to me and smashing it under his heel. My parents rushed over, Mom fussing, her voice high and frantic. "Accidents happen, sweetheart. Don't overreact." Dad muttered something about letting it go. Their words blurred in my ears, meaningless against the thundering of my pulse. Every nerve in my body screamed with injustice. After everything, his TikTok betrayal, the dinner confrontation, the endless enabling, they still shielded him. They still looked at me like I was overreacting, as if my grief and rage were the real disruption, not his cruelty. Around us, the party struggled to resume. Laughter returned in weak bursts. The skyline still twinkled. The music picked up again. But for me, the night was poisoned. All I could see were the silver shards Ryan placed back into the velvet box, gleaming like broken trust, proof that Alex would stop at nothing to wreck what I built. I swallowed the scream clawing at my throat, every muscle in my body trembling. And then, as my eyes swept across the terrace, I noticed it. Guests were watching. Not just me, not just the broken necklace, him. Some had seen it, the deliberate glance, the calculated slip, the smirk that gave him away. There were witnesses now. The real question burned hotter than the rage in my chest, searing into me as the night carried on. Who caught his act? The rooftop shimmered under the fairy lights, but for me the glow had gone cold. Guests murmured in clusters, their voices hushed and urgent, like the aftermath of an accident nobody wanted to acknowledge outright. The jazz band tried to recover, filling the air with soft brass and piano, but the music felt thin, unable to cover the heavy silence Alex had left behind. The velvet box, once the proud cradle of our heirloom necklace, sat shut and hollow on the dessert table, as if mocking me with its emptiness. My heart thudded against my ribs, but I forced my breathing steady. Ryan stood close, his hand slipping into mine with quiet certainty. He didn't need words. His thumb brushed over my knuckles in slow, deliberate strokes, grounding me in the moment, tethering me to something steady when the ground beneath me felt split. Then came my mother's voice, soft but sharp, the same tone she had used my whole life to smooth over Alex's wreckage. "He's just sensitive, Em. Don't overreact." The words hit like glass shattering inside me. Sensitive. That word had excused every tantrum, every failure, every cruel twist he inflicted. Now it was being used again to silence me while the shards of my symbol of unity still glistened in Ryan's hands. I wanted to scream, to demand how long they'd keep protecting him at my expense, but I didn't, not this time. Instead, I drew in a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and plastered on a smile that felt carved into my skin. I lifted my glass and projected my voice above the uneasy whispers. Let's not let one moment ruin the night. There's a full dessert spread waiting for everyone. Macarons, cheesecakes, chocolate strawberries. Please enjoy them under the lights. For a moment the air held still, hesitant, until Lisa stepped forward, her voice bright and confident. "Yes, you all need to try the brulee. It's perfection." She clapped her hands lightly, her energy pulling people toward the dessert table. Gradually the chatter shifted. Forks clinked against plates, the smell of caramelized sugar and fresh berries filled the air, and the hum of celebration began to stitch itself back together. But I could feel Alex watching me. From across the terrace, arms folded, lips curled into that smug little smirk. He wanted me to unravel, to confirm the story he'd spun online, that I was brittle, selfish, undeserving. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Then my clutch buzzed against my side. Once, twice, a third time. The vibration was insistent, like a hand tapping my shoulder. I pulled out my phone, shielding the glow from the guests. An unknown number. A single text. "Check this link. You need to see it." My breath caught. With trembling fingers, I tapped. A video appeared, shaky at first, then stabilizing into something horrifyingly clear. The necklace, gleaming under the lights. Alex brushing past. That sly glance so sharp it cut even through the grainy feed. His elbow jerking, deliberate. The crash. The shards scattering across the floor. All of it caught, frame by frame, in brutal, undeniable clarity. A hidden camera. Someone had been recording. My pulse roared in my ears. This wasn't just Alex against me anymore. Someone else had eyes on us. Someone close enough, prepared enough, to catch the exact moment of his sabotage and deliver it straight to me. I looked up from the screen, scanning the terrace. Guests were laughing again, forks cutting into cakes, champagne bubbling in glasses. No one looked guilty. No one looked like they had just delivered a dagger into my hand. I showed Ryan the phone, holding it low between us, his brow furrowed, his jaw locked. "This is proof," he whispered, voice taut with anger. "You're not imagining it. He did it on purpose." Proof. The word reverberated in me. Proof that Alex had meant to hurt me, yes, but also proof that someone else was involved, someone watching silently from the shadows. Was it a friend protecting me? Or was it a foe feeding the fire for reasons I couldn't yet see? I tucked the phone back into my clutch, my decision crystallizing. Alex thought he'd broken me tonight. He thought smashing that necklace would silence me, push me into retreat, but he had only given me resolve. Hours later, when the last guests had left and the fairy lights dimmed, Ryan and I walked home through damp Seattle streets, the mist clinging to our clothes. My heels clicked against the pavement, sharp and determined. By the time I reached my apartment, exhaustion pressed heavy, but anger burned hotter. I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop casting long shadows against the walls. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I began to type. To Alex, no more mentorship, no more seed fund, no more offers of help. Every olive branch I had once extended, I was withdrawing. He had burned every bridge, and this time, I wasn't rebuilding. My hands trembled, but the fire in my chest steadied me as I hit send. Enough was enough. Later, lying in bed, the city glow bleeding faintly through the blinds, I replayed the night in my mind. The smirk on his face, the sound of the necklace cracking, the video looping again and again, and layered over it all, the text that had changed everything. Check this link. You need to see it. Someone was watching. Someone knew, and maybe, just maybe, they had been watching longer than I realized. I closed my eyes, the question burning hotter than the anger itself. Who's watching us, and why? The hotel suite was hushed, the kind of silence that pressed against my chest like a weight. Beyond the wide glass windows, Seattle's skyline shimmered in cold silver, each tower blinking with light, as if the city itself were watching me unravel. The hum of traffic below was distant, muffled, like the world had drifted further away while I sat cross-legged on the bed, the glow of my phone lighting my face. I had replayed the hidden camera video at least a dozen times, the necklace glinting on the table, Alex's glance, sly and cutting, the flick of his elbow, the deliberate crash. The sound of silver snapping echoed in my skull, each replay cutting deeper. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before, a small folder symbol tucked in the corner. My chest tightened as I tapped it. The folder opened to a list of clips. Not just one, dozens. My breath snagged in my throat as I scrolled through timestamps dating back weeks. This wasn't one recording. Someone had been watching longer. I tapped the top file. The screen flickered to life, grainy and shaky, but the sound cut through clear enough. My voice, sharp, tired, familiar. Alex, you can't just expect me to cover this for you. It was from the jewelry studio. Our argument, word for word, caught by the same camera. The realization hit like ice in my veins. He hadn't just smashed the necklace. He had been recording me, our fights, our moments of tension, collecting them like ammunition. My stomach twisted. This wasn't clumsiness or jealousy. This was blackmail. The bathroom door opened behind me. Ryan stepped out, damp hair falling across his forehead, a towel slung around his shoulders. He stopped short when he saw my face. Em? His voice was careful, steady, the way it always was when he knew I was about to crack. What is it? I turned the screen toward him. The video played, the tinny sound of my own voice bleeding into the silence. Ryan's jaw tightened, the lines of his face hardening as his eyes narrowed on the grainy footage. He recorded you? His voice dropped, low and sharp. This isn't jealousy anymore. This is calculated. This is dangerous. I swallowed hard, my throat burning, unable to answer. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Dad. His name glowed on the screen. I hesitated, thumb hovering. Every part of me screamed to ignore it, but a darker part, one that needed truth, forced me to swipe. Dad? My voice cracked. A pause, then his sigh, long, weary, laced with guilt. Emily, don't be upset, but we gave Alex some help last year. $5,000. He said it was just to get back on his feet. We didn't want to stress you. The words slammed into me harder than the video ever could. I sat upright, my free hand gripping the bedspread until my knuckles ached. You what? My voice broke into pieces. You knew what he was like, and you still gave him money? You kept it from me? His tone softened, almost pleading. We thought it was the right thing to do. You're stable, Em. You've always been the strong one. He needed the help. That cursed word again. Stable. My blood roared in my ears. Stable meant I could be ignored. Stable meant my struggles didn't count. Stable meant every sacrifice I'd made, every skipped meal, every night spent grinding through exhaustion, was invisible because I wasn't falling apart like Alex. My nails dug deeper into the blanket, the rough fabric biting into my skin. I barely heard the rest of Dad's excuses about family, responsibility, forgiveness. All I could think was how complicit they were. They weren't just enabling him, they were fueling him. Ryan sat down beside me, his hand steady on my shoulder. His warmth grounded me, but my chest still felt like it was caving in. My father's words blurred into static before the call finally ended, leaving only silence again. The suite felt colder now. The city's glow stretched across the carpet in fractured lines of blue and silver. My phone lay heavy in my lap, tainted by every secret it had revealed. Alex wasn't just spoiled. He wasn't just reckless. He was manipulative, sinister, calculated. And my parents, blind with guilt, trapped in their cycle of excuses, were his accomplices. I stood and crossed to the desk by the window. The chair creaked as I sat, the laptop's glow spilling across my face. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, trembling, before fury pushed them into motion. The words came hard and fast. Alex, any support I once considered giving you, mentorship, introductions, funding, is revoked, effective immediately. I will not tolerate manipulation, blackmail, or lies. Do not contact me until you're ready to face the consequences of your actions. The cursor blinked at the end, daring me to hesitate. My chest heaved, my jaw clenched, and then I hit send. The click was louder than it should have been. It felt like the door slamming on everything I had ever tried to do for him. But as the email vanished into the ether, something in me stilled. I leaned back in the chair, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Ryan came beside me, sliding his hand into mine. His grip was firm, warm, anchoring me to something real. He's not just spoiled anymore, I whispered, the words raw. He's plotting to control me, and I'm done. In the glass, my reflection looked pale, hollowed by exhaustion but edged with something sharper, resolve. The anger still burned, but it wasn't chaotic anymore. It was honed, focused. Alex could smash my necklace. He could twist my parents with lies. He could even try to blackmail me with recordings. But he couldn't own me, not anymore. The city pulsed with life outside, the skyline blinking like a constellation of eyes. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their watch. I was ready for it. One question rang through me, sharp as a blade, colder than the night air seeping through the glass. Could my family ever face the consequences of his actions? Because whether they were ready or not, I was. The morning on the Lanai should have been perfect. The Hawaiian sun spread gold across the ocean, waves rolling in with a steady hush that sounded like the world finally exhaling. A soft breeze carried the scent of plumeria, mingling with the sharp, rich aroma of Kona coffee rising from the mugs Ryan and I held. Our table was set with tropical fruit, pineapple slices glistening with juice, papaya sweet and tender. For once it felt like I had stepped into the life I had been fighting for, simple, steady, free from the shadows of Alex's chaos. Then my phone buzzed against the table, slicing through the calm. Once, twice, a third time. I tried to ignore it, to sip my coffee and stay in the warmth of that peace. But it wouldn't stop. When I finally reached for it, the headline on the screen hollowed me out. Local man's startup collapses amid gambling debts. The photo was small, grainy, but I knew the face. Alex. Hollow-eyed, hair messy, being ushered away from a courthouse. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. Ryan leaned in, noticing the way my chest seized. "What is it?" I turned the phone so he could see. He scanned the article, his jaw hardening, lips pressed thin. 18,000, he muttered. It wasn't an app. It was gambling all along. 18,000. Not research, not seed funding, not some brilliant innovation. Just debt. Debt hidden beneath excuses and posturing. My mind flashed back like falling dominoes. The luxury watch I glimpsed in his photo, the cryptic email from Mom years ago about covering extras, the hidden camera at the party. They weren't disconnected mysteries. They were all pieces of the same truth. The email hadn't been tuition or rent. It had been Mom promising to pay off his losses. The camera at the party hadn't been random surveillance. It was a family friend, one who'd known about Alex's betting and wanted me to see what he was capable of. Every thread I had pulled on came together in that single crushing moment. My family had been shielding him, even as his lies consumed us. I set the phone down on the table, the ceramic mug clinking too loudly against the glass surface. The breeze was still warm, the waves still rhythmic, but inside me everything was tilting. It was never about me, I whispered more to myself than to Ryan. It was always about covering for him. Ryan reached for my hand, his palm steady against mine. "They can't hide him forever," he said quietly. "This time, he's exposed." 6 months later, back in Seattle, the air smelled of cedar smoke and grilled burgers. It was summer, the kind of evening where the sky stayed lavender until late, the kind of night where kids darted barefoot through grass with sparklers. My parents' backyard glowed under strings of warm bulbs, laughter rising around picnic tables stacked with corn on the cob and paper plates slick with barbecue sauce. On the surface, it looked ordinary. Family gathered, food shared, music low from a speaker tucked against the porch. But underneath, everything had shifted. I saw Alex before he saw me, leaner, quieter. The swagger that once coated his every move was gone, replaced with something brittle. He stood near the fence, hands shoved deep into his pockets, shoulders bent as if the weight of his choices had finally settled on him. For a long moment, I thought about passing by. I had built my boundaries brick by brick. Why let him chip at them now? But then his eyes lifted, tired, raw, and for reasons I can't fully explain, my feet carried me closer. We stood under the string lights, their glow soft but unforgiving, illuminating every line of tension on his face. He cleared his throat, voice low, stripped of bravado. "I messed up, Em. I'm trying to fix it, for real." The words hung there, heavy. My chest tightened. Instinct told me to recoil, to remind him that sorry didn't erase the sabotage, the blackmail, the betrayal. But his voice, cracked and bare, wasn't performance this time. His shoulders sagged, his eyes didn't dart away. For once, it felt real. "I don't trust words anymore," I said softly, my arms crossed tight across my chest. "But I see you trying. That's something." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of cicadas and the distant laughter of kids. His eyes dropped, then rose again just enough to meet mine. He nodded once. "I'll prove it." It wasn't absolution. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a crack in the wall, a door, just barely opening. Later that night, I sat with Ryan near the fire pit, watching sparks shoot upward, vanishing into the night sky. The heat warmed my skin, the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes. And for the first time in a long time, my chest felt light. My family wasn't magically whole. The scars Alex left were stitched deep. But the necklace he had shattered had been remade. Not with silver links, but with something far stronger. Boundaries. And those boundaries, I realized, were love in their truest form. Because love without limits wasn't love at all. It was enablement. And enablement had nearly destroyed us. True support meant letting people face consequences, even when it hurt. It meant allowing them to crash if that was the only way they'd learn to rise. As I looked around the backyard, the glow of the string lights, Ryan's calm smile beside me, Alex's tentative distance near the fence, I felt it settle deep in my chest. Not closure, not forgiveness, but freedom. And now I want to ask you, have you faced betrayal that forced you to draw lines, to make choices you never thought you'd have to make? Did it change you the way it changed me? If you've lived through something like this, share your story in the comments, subscribe, and send this to someone who needs to hear it, because real change doesn't start with pretending everything's fine. It starts with courage,